Jones, and I'll do a video and a breakdown on each. And then, thank you. And then I'll just label, you know, who I think is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 guys like Ezra Charles that I think are so underrated.
Ezra Charles, first of all, he was around during an era where, you know, he won the heavyweight title, but the fighters, the athletes, the people were smaller. So they can't get their head around how great he was, because he was known as a heavyweight, but he was a great light heavyweight and even middleweight. But maybe the greatest light heavyweight or one of the greatest of all time. But so they can't get their head around and really appreciate a guy because, you know, in their mind, he wasn't big enough to be a heavyweight. So, and he wasn't around during that time when we had social media, where, you know, you could understand more about those guys. So some of those, it always bothers me and hurts me for them, that history, that understanding of those great fighters from that time is never understood by the fans of today properly. Baseball is, and baseball been around a long time, not as long as boxing, but baseball has done a better job because you get the writers, you got the media system, and just the amount of media organizations that publicize baseball, that obviously it's endorsed as a sport that is properly backed by different sponsors, by obviously it's on regular television, it's accepted into society at a better, larger way than boxing is, where you know, again, all the networks follow baseball, all the big corporations sponsor it, and you don't have to have a boxing. And because you don't have to have a boxing, you don't have the media representation that goes back to show you the history of boxing. All the other sports, basketball, baseball, football, you know, you get a young fan, you got baseball cards, you got football cards, you got access to their history. You have something promoting their history, something teaching their history. You don't have any of such things, really, for the most part, in boxing. And that's why I'm glad when I meet people like you, to be honest with you, that keep that alive or bring that to life and to the forefront as much as you're able to the audience. You got an audience, you told me before, of about 500,000. That's 500,000 more people that will hear about people like Harry Greb and Sam Langford and people that, you know, other than the great fighters of today like Beaver and Better Beaver, where, you know, obviously it's right there, you know, present. So people think that those are the only fighters that exist. That, oh wow, this was the greatest, he's the greatest light heavyweight. And they don't know that there was a guy named Archie Moore, the old Mongoose, that was pretty damn good. and you know, and had close to 300 fights and had 140 knockouts. You know, they don't, and you say 140 knockouts, what are you talking about? You mean 140 fights? No, 140 knockouts. So when someone like you comes into my business, boxing, which has been my business 50 years now, I'm grateful. I'm grateful. I'm thankful that we can have somebody that can be a voice for those unheard voices, for those you know, people that are not even shadows anymore of the past. That you can bring them back to life. You can bring them to life, and hopefully let some of the fans of today understand the rich history of boxing and how they don't understand way before, you know, you had a great fighter like Mayweather, you know, who's tremendous, and it was a tremendous boxer, no doubt about it. But even before Pernell Whitaker, there was a guy named Willie the Whip, Willie Pep,
Will of the Wisp.
Will of the Wisp Pep from Connecticut, that you know, legend has it that he won a round one time without throwing a punch, you know. And there's a movie being done on him now, actually. So, which is good to hear. But again, I'm happy when someone like you, especially so young, you're 27 years old, you come around and you take this interest, not only interest in the sport, but that you actually have done your work, where you understand the fighters of the past.
I feel like there's so much. Firstly, thank you, because you've been a massive inspiration for what I've done, and I get so much insight from your work. And you say these old fighters don't get much exposure. You're one of the guys that highlights fighters like Henry Armstrong. So when I'm looking into these old guys, I look through, as much as I can. A guy like Harry Greb and Sam Langford, like you say.
Harry Greb never got his hair mussed. I mean, how good was he? 300 fights, the Pittsburgh Windmill. I mean, if they had these punch stats today, their fingers would fall off.
And he was blind in one eye.
And he's blind for 100 fights probably. So, I mean, just a special. You're just calling him an enigma today, because you wouldn't understand how to understand what he was and how he threw that many punches, how he fought everyone. And the thing different from today is, other than the last year when Turkey Al-Sheikh has been changing the landscape, having everyone fight each other, or have some of the top guys fight each other, which has been a change in boxing recently. But back in the days of Harry Greb and the guys we're talking about, they all fought each other. They all fought the best fighters. That was a regular thing. They fought him 5 times, 6 times.
He fought Mickey Walker in that 15-round war, and then 2 weeks later, Maxi Rosenbloom. Like 15 rounds back to back.
And then he fought Gene Tunney a bunch of times, the heavyweight champ, who was tremendous. Another guy.
Beat him up. The only guy to do so.
But Tunney was special. He never got beat up like that again.
No.
Because he said, I never will get beat. I learned.
Yeah.
He gave me a hard lesson. He gave me a hard lesson, a painful lesson, but you know what? It never happened again. And then he went back and beat Greb.
Yeah, I saw a rare bit of footage actually of Gene Tunney talking, because I asked, you can see him fighting. There's not much of him talking, and it was really clear. And it was talking about the beating Greg gave him, and like you say, how he overcame that. And I think he won 3 of the next 4 fights.
He did.
Yeah, and that's the thing with Greb, and the mythos around him is there's no footage. There has been footage that has existed, the Walker fight and the Tunney fight. I mean, I take it, have you ever seen that footage? Do you know of anyone that has seen that footage?
The only thing I saw, I had the gift, the privilege of seeing it, because I was with Custom Auto.
Yeah.
And Jim Jacobs and Bill Caton own Big Fights Inc. Yeah. And they had the biggest fight film collection in the world. And they found stuff that was put away in somebody's attic in the middle of out west somewhere in a farm. Yeah. And they found it. They found it. No, they found a training video. Yeah. It was just a training video. I forget how it came about, but along the lines of the story I was just describing that. They got a call, they went out there, and sure enough, there's a great, mysterious Harry Greb, but it was a training video.
I think I've seen it. He's hitting the speed bag, and his shadow boxing looks a bit awkward for the Mickey Walker fight.
Yeah, I think that was what it was. But other than that, again, it's been elusive. Yeah. Finding, but then, it's kind of like a lot of things in boxing. That's what makes it so special, the mystique of it. Yeah. Like, Charlie Burley. Yeah, nobody knows about Charlie Burley and how good he really was.
The most avoided fighter ever, really.
All I know is that I heard that Sugar Ray Robinson didn't want. That's enough for me. When I heard Sugar Ray Robinson didn't want to fight him, if that's even close to being true.
Yeah, and Marcel Sedan.
Sedan, so underrated because he died early with the plane crash. Yeah. But and of course he lost to Lamont. He separated his shoulder. Yeah. But what a fighter.
I think.
And what a fighter Lamont was. Yeah. He doesn't get enough credit.
Well, I was when I did the video on him recently. I was looking at all his slips and his shoulder rolls and just the way he used to ride shots. He had that great chin. But these guys were so crafty back in the day. And going back to your original point of...
They had to be.
Yeah, but they were fighting all the time.
They were fighting all the time. They were fighting every week. They were fighting all the time. And they were... Again, it was no soft touches. Yeah. They were fighting good fighters right from the beginning.
Knocked out a heavyweight contender. That's a welterweight that wasn't even big enough for middleweight.
Well, Sam Langford beat everyone from lightweight to heavyweight. Yeah. I mean, what about him? Yeah. I mean, Burley's, Sam Langford. Yeah. All that. And how about Lou Jenkins? What a puncher he was, lightweight. Yeah. I mean, that guy could knock out heavyweights. I mean, people don't even know who Lou Jenkins was.
I get the ultimate buzz doing these videos because I'm a fighter at the end of the day, and you can learn so much from watching these. but I get the ultimate buzz and just excitement when I put a video out there about a Sam Langford or a Harry Greb or a Henry Armstrong. People are like, wow, I never heard about that. And their feats are so jaw-dropping. I think Greb went 45-0 one year, but I think he only lost once in 120 fights.
Yeah, something
Langford,
like that.
from Joe Gans to heavyweight, from lightweight to heavyweight. You know,
One of the best fighters.
yeah, it's
But
crazy.
nobody would give him a title shot.
No,
He-
never a world champ.
Never would give him a world title shot. Otherwise, he would have been a champ many times over.
Yeah.
And he beat, I think it was somewhere between 9 and 12 Hall of Fame world champions.
Yeah. I did a list of the fighters with the most world champions defeated, and Greb beat 16. I think Langford beat 12, but he used to fight guys like Joe Jeanette and Harry Lewis 20 times. And Jimmy McLaren beat
Another
13.
great fighter.
Yeah, another great
fighter.
So if I'd love to hear this from you, because when I hear it from lots of people, they say Tyson, Ali, Leonard, great fighters. Who are your top 5 of all time?
Heavyweight?
Just pound for pound.
Oh.
I mean, it's hard to whittle it down to 5.
I mean, listen, your personal preference comes into play too.
Of course.
I like to keep it as cold as I can.
Yeah.
But it's hard to keep something cold when you're passionate about something.
Yeah,
because that's not cold.
I know, yeah.
And when you know what these people went through.
Yeah.
So you're passionate about that and about them being represented right. And so now, besides being passionate about it, now you're careful and you feel a responsibility to tread water carefully and and try to get to the right place, because there's not enough people that do give these guys the right place.
Yeah.
That do give them their place that they deserve. So I take it as well. I got to really be thoughtful here, because, you know, it really matters.
And it's so difficult
because
to compare the eras.
Because there's not enough out there about it to begin with.
Yeah.
So it's like there's a responsibility attached to it. And there's always a responsibility to you saying what you believe, that you want it to be as accurate as possible. You want it to truly be not tainted by anything personal. But I'm honest about it. We do have personal biases.
Yeah.
There are certain guys. I love Marvin Hagler. Yeah. I had a good relationship with him when he was alive. God bless him. He died way too early. But I do have a extra love towards him in that kind of way, that I try not to in any way, again, impact when I'm rating him as a middleweight. You know, which it's easier to put him in start with the top 5 and then figure it from there. That's not hard for me to do. But when you talk about just greatest overall, you know, there's so many things you have to take into consideration: who they fought, how many times, how many fights they had. You also got to take into, I think, a little bit into consideration how they impacted history, the history of the sport. You know, that's why Jack Johnson has to be thought of. You know, how he impacted the history,
Dempsey and Ali and
what he
those
went
guys,
through during those times, how hard it was for him. You know, being hated, being villainized. You know, because he was a black heavyweight in a white world, and you know how that impacted him, how he had to deal with that. So I think, again, Ali, when you talk about Ali, how he impacted the social landscape, you know, outside of boxing, what he went through, the 3 years that were taken away from him. Yeah, so there's so much that I think does have to be considered and thought about at the end of the day, besides their talent, besides the easier part, which is just how good they were as far as, you know, delivering punches or avoiding punches. I love Henry Armstrong.
Yeah.
First of all, he's got the greatest nickname of all time, Homicide Ant. So I love that, but I just love that he should have won 4 full weight classes. He won the featherweight, he won the lightweight, full, no middle, no in between. No cheating. Not that they cheat, but really,
Because it's the equivalent of 7 today.
Yeah. So he won, right. So he won the featherweight, he won the lightweight, he won the welterweight, and then he got robbed against Severino Garcia.
Who he'd already beat as well.
Yeah, 15-round draw. They robbed him. He didn't do business with somebody, and they robbed him. So he really should have 4, but he had 3 full weight class titles, and then defended them simultaneously when he went defended them. So for him to do that, and one time would he fight like 30-something times in 1 year?
In 1 year. In that window, he went 59-1 with 51 knockouts. Because I remember that, because these things stick out to me. So
and didn't he fight like 30-something times in 1 year? That's a career today.
Yeah, and I think he had like 20 plus consecutive knockouts in that streak. Crazy.
Yeah.
And like 11 Hall of Famers.
And what he overcame. He lost early on.
Yeah.
He's a great example to people that lose fights or lose in life or lose in business and they want to give up. They want to get discouraged. Look at the great Henry Armstrong, and he lost maybe 3 of his first 5 fights. He got knocked out his first fight, and so you look at that and what he had to, and then you start thinking about that he didn't make no excuses, but the way he lived, where he came from, how poor he was, that he didn't have proper nutrient, he didn't eat. There's a very good chance that he didn't even have enough food to eat properly for those early fights, where that could have played in, or probably did play in to that. And then what does he make of himself? He loses those early fights, and he goes on to be a guy that I'm thinking about if he should be the greatest of all time in a sport that's been around longer than any other sport. I mean, for Christ's sakes, you got cave dwellings 2,000 years old where they've discovered them, where archaeologists have gone in and they see what looks like paintings depicting people fighting. So the sport goes, we don't even know how far back the sport goes. It goes back so far. And then for me to even be contemplating that Henry Armstrong could be at the top of of that, and I am contemplating it. He is one of those guys.
In known history, in known prize fighting history.
He's one of them. Harry Greb would be another one. I mean, he fought everybody. He had 300 fights, 100 of them with one eye. He fought everybody, not once, not twice, not 3 times, 5, 6, whatever.
And he wasn't losing ever with one eye and all of those injuries.
And just incredible. So you think about him. You think about
a guy. I could just not to cut you off because I'd like to, but a guy that really sprung to my mind when you thought about those losses. Because today, if you had those kind of losses early in your career, you wouldn't get the shot. But Benny Leonard, I think Benny Leonard
is great.
Yeah,
and he had the lightweight title so long, and this is a guy who, again, what was great about people like Joe Louis was he had a whole race depending on him. Like actually, like when bad things were going on in the country, unfortunately, and we got past that and we correct that, but and it's happened in all world. It's not just there. I mean, those things have been everywhere that you have to avoid, and it's unfortunate. It's a shame, but and terrible. It's beyond a shame. But when we had that terrible situation in our country where black people didn't get treated properly, there were black families that actually would say, hey, if Joe Louis could do it, you could do it. That, to me, that's powerful.
To
me, that puts him in a certain place, right? Just that alone. If Joe Louis could do it, you could do it. And so you're talking about, having just certain pressures that and certain representation of with that pressure. Benny Leonard was a guy. He represented the Jewish race. It was during a time where the Jews, it was terrible. 6 million of them got terminated in the Holocaust. And probably more than that, probably 12 million in total. But 6 million that is basically understood to be just in the camps during the Holocaust, there's no word to describe that period. Horrific doesn't describe it. Inhuman, whatever. But Benny Leonard, when Jews were still being, prejudiced against, just like with Joe Louis, what he represented for the black people and the black families, for the Jewish families, the Jewish people, same thing. Hey, Benny Leonard could do it. Benny Leonard can overcome it. Benny Leonard's tough enough. You're tough enough. And the Jewish people needed that because that's what makes boxing so special. how it integrates itself with so many aspects of human society, where the Jews were being successful, going to school. They were doing things to being brought up in families, trying to push them into not athletics so much, but into bettering themselves through education and trying to be successful, trying to be able to move in those kind of directions. And they were thought of as not a strong race. They were thought of, because of that, they're a weak race. They're not a tough race, which of course it couldn't be farther from the truth. There's tough people in every race, but it started to be stereotyped to where, the Jews, they might be smart, but they're not tough, and they can't deal with this, or they're not resilient, or that. And then Benny Lennon, the greatest fighter of his time, lightweight champion of the world, can't be tougher than the world champion. Nah. And then he allowed the Jewish families to say, and the Jewish people to kind of gather around that and say, oh no, we are tough. We are represented by the toughest man in the world right now, Benny Lennon. Yeah. How can you say that we're not of a tough race? So to me, I find all of that, I look at all of that and find that all really interesting, that it integrates itself into the sport. So Benny Lennon, he's another one who would be up there. Not to mention also that his hair never got mussed.
Yeah.
I mean, he was that good.
I mean, he was like, him and Gene Tunney, in my opinion, were like the first modern fighters. I mean, when you look back, that's over 110 years ago, but they're deploying the shoulder roll, they're getting in and out of range.
I might have to put Tunney on that list.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a guy who really lost maybe one fight, I mean, in like 90 or whatever it was, somewhere, I don't know the exact metric of it. But this is a guy who was small, like they all are. He moves up from middleweight, he fights, becomes heavyweight champion of the world, beats the Manasseh Mauler, great puncher, great finisher, Jack Dempsey, and gets off the floor, wins that fight, beats him again, and again, brings science to another level, like James Corbett had, years earlier. James Corbett had done that after John L. Sullivan was the toughest man in the pub and in the world. But then all of a sudden you had Corbett, who could box. He could brought another dimension to the sport. And then of course came with it with the Marquess of Queensberry rules, all of that. And so now you got Corbett incorporating movement, all of the things that never were part of it. And as you said, there's other people that follow, incorporating, pioneering things.
And that's a big thing as well, the pioneers, like the revolutionary fighters, like your Gene Tunney's, your Benny Leonards, the Georgie Benton. Everyone loves the shoulder roll nowadays, the Floyd and the James
Great trainer, great fighter. Yeah. Doesn't get enough credit, Georgie Benton.
Yeah.
He probably beat Hurricane Carter.
Yeah.
He probably won that fight.
Massive puncher.
Massive. Massive.
Yeah.
And finisher.
Yeah.
When he hurt you. But
he done Emil Griffith, didn't he?
Another great fighter, but he didn't get enough credit, Georgie Benton. But again, him is allowing these people now to have a voice from beyond the grave. And unfortunately, they should have had a voice when they were walking this planet, but they didn't. They weren't known enough. I mean, Georgie was known as a great trainer, God bless him, but not known for how he became a trainer as a great fighter. And not known for that. And then you come along and you put a platform out there. Please watch it. Please educate yourself. Seriously, I mean it. Just to give yourself a chance to know what you were missing. Because, a lot of times we're missing things we never know. It's not just food. You go and taste food, you say, oh, God, I never knew that I was missing that. Well, it can be other things too. It can be boxing. It can just be history. It can be great people that you can learn from, what they overcame, what some of these stories we're touching on here. What these guys, not just what they did with their fists, but what they did with their life, how they got there, how they were able to persevere and overcome the things that quite frankly, because they went through that overcoming in that period doesn't exist anymore. They were part of that period that will never exist. So people today won't have to go through that. But you're going through something. You're going through some kinds of trials and tribulations. Everyone does. I mean, life is a fight, and whatever you do. So whatever it is that you're going through, you do need inspiration. You do need to know someone else went through something. So just to kind of set your feet and say, okay, I can do this because he did it, or he did something harder. If he was able to overcome that, you know, my situation might not be quite as impossible to overcome as I think it is right now. So you learn it's more than just seeing how he delivered a uppercut or a body shot, or how he slid to the side, or how on the inside he manipulated you. Because those old time fighters, they were allowed to fight on the inside. Today, half the time, the ref don't even let you fight inside, where they knew how to move your arms, and they stop you, lock you down, take your elbow and turn you, you know, do little tiny things. They knew how to do all that. So you're going to learn more than that. You're going to learn things you can actually use to better your life, to help you in your fight, whatever it is you're dealing with. Like I said, with a guy like Henry Armstrong, what he couldn't even eat when he was, and he found a way to overcome that and not let those losses early on stop him. Or a guy like Jack Johnson, you know, that people want to kill him because he was a black heavyweight champion, and meanwhile, he goes and wins the heavyweight title and has to deal with all that people don't even realize. Or Joe Louis, who had to fight Max Schmelling after being knocked out by Schmelling, and then when he wins the title, he fights Schmelling outdoors in Yankee Stadium, on the eve, with the world on the eve of World War II, and with a guy named Hitler saying he's going to take over, he's going to have a superior race, and he's going to take the world over. And Joe Louis, legend has it, I believe it, gets a phone call from the president and says, Joe, you got to win this one for the good guys. I mean, you talk about
pressure,
pressure. Yeah. You know that Allen Iverson, that you've seen that funny practice. We're talking about practice here. Pressure. We're talking about pressure. You're talking about pressure that you hear some of these, and I'm not saying people don't go through things. God knows I know that. But when you compare the things that sometimes people today say, oh, this is pressure, and then you look at a guy like Joe Louis, who's got to go and fight a guy who knocked him out and gave him his only loss, and he's got to fight him, like I said, with the world on fire, with people saying, hey, you're representing the free world. You're not just representing the United States of America. You're representing the free world against tyranny. You're talking about a whole different animal here, a whole different...
When you speak of class, poise, coolness, and greatness, with all of that, he went out and stopped him in a round.
One round.
That's great.
Looked like he broke his ribs. I mean, I don't know what the physical damage. And Schmelling was a great fighter. Schmelling was a great puncher, really hell of a fighter. People don't realize how good he was. And he destroyed him in one round. And Schmelling was a good person because Schmelling later on, he because of what he went through. After that, Hitler put him in the paratroopers, and I've done my history. This is what they did. The paratroopers in Germany had a 5% survival rate. 5% chance you're coming back alive. 5%. Not good. And they put him in a paratrooper. He comes back alive, and his house has been bulldozed. It's gone. He's got nothing. And he's got nothing. But you know what? Something happens. Something happens. Because he was a fighter, because he had that gene, that determination that he developed from fighting, that you figure you can't use it no more. Can't use it. You can't get in the ring no more. Can't put gloves on no more. No, it's still there. You can use it. You can use it not to give up now, to try to find light in the dark place. You can still use it, not to give up, not to fall apart. And somehow he didn't, and then what happens? The story has it that there was a little company named Coca-Cola that had started up, and they were thinking about branching out in Germany. and they were having a meeting, and while they were having a marketing meeting, one of the guys said, do we have anyone in Germany that we can set up as our representative to get the company going over there? And a guy in the room puts his hand up and said, I do. There was a fighter named Max Schmelling. So who? Max Schmelling. He was a fighter. And I had a connection with him, whatever. Okay, reach out. And the rest, as they say, is history. He became the main representative of Coca. He owned Coca-Cola companies, whatever, obviously outlets, whatever they were. In Germany, became a multi-millionaire over in Germany, and lived a good long life to his 90s. But when I say a good life, he took care of Joe Louis.
I was going to say he was a pallbearer, wasn't he?
Good, not only a pallbearer. Yeah. When Joe Louis went through his tough times, he was sending money. Frank Sinatra did some stuff too, quietly, but Schmelling was actually subsidizing Joe quietly, without anybody knowing, taking care of him, and that's why he was a pallbearer. Yeah. That's where that connection comes. Besides that, he fought him twice, so he was a good man.
Yeah,
and good things do happen to good people, and again, he even though he came back and everything was gone, he used that fighter's mentality not to just fall apart, and something came. And so there's a lesson there. And then he lived a good life. And he never forgot his position now that he could take care of someone else. And he did. So there's a lot to garner in this sport. There really is. There's so much. I'm reminded of it. I get excited just talking to you that it reminds me of how much there is to garner from this sport, to get out of it. Throw some more names.
No, I was going to say, it's like you say, though. I mean, just me personally, this sport has changed my life. And that fight you say that you have inside you, that there's so many comparisons with the real life. And there's with real life. And I don't think it's any coincidence that most of these icons come from boxing, because it's a sport in which it forces adversity and struggle. It's normally people that come from those tough areas and need to do this, and are able to just with willpower, talent as well, but with willpower and dedication and desire, just achieve some unbelievable things. And if you can take a little bit of that energy into your life,
you know what boxing does? They didn't just have that willpower. They found out they had it.
Yeah.
And that's the lesson for you. All of you, no matter what you do, you box, you put gloves on, you don't never put a glove on, but you like the sport, you watch it in the way you do. The thing here that he just touched on, that I'm going to just advance a little bit, is that if somebody asks me, Teddy, what is the most important thing? And this is a tough question. My goodness, it's tough. Teddy, what would be the one main thing that somebody would get out, say a kid, would get out of boxing? And now there's a million. Because I'm with a guy who came here and really, he has burdened me with the toughest thing in the world, to name the top fighters in this sport that's been around, and I love. So as long as he's done that to me, I can do this to myself. I can say, all right, if I'm going to try to name the best fighters, then I'm going to name the one quality that would pop in my head that would come from doing boxing. And you don't have to become a pro, just having an amateur fight. Just getting in the ring and sparring and facing your fears, your inhibitions, your doubts. I would say it would be finding out that you could depend on yourself. I would say that.
Yeah.
Just that alone. Because he touched on something. He said, you said, willpower. And a lot of people who are home say, I'm never going to have it. They had it. No, they found it. They found it. They developed it. They didn't have it. That's the best thing I could say all day today, is that if you learn anything, you get anything from this guy who never graduated high school. If you could get anything, it would be that, no, It's not they're different than you. It's not that a fighter was born different, that they were minus fears and they were minus certain things that inhibit you and inhibit other. No. They had all those things. They had all those fears, all those doubts. They may have even quit early in their life. You don't even know about it. You don't even know about it. But they got to this place. And part of what allowed them to get to it was finding out through their experience of getting in the ring, of facing somebody, facing all the, facing the boogeyman of doubts of yourself, that they could depend on themselves, that they could rely on themselves, that they could. Some of the kids that I run gyms I was running gyms that were helping kids that had no fathers, the kids that really they were getting ready to be thrown or had been thrown in juvenile delinquent centers already, where people had lost hope, had lost hope for them, and they had lost hope for themselves. And I had my charity foundation had sponsored, without getting into it, because I don't do no more than any other foundation or any less. So I won't put any time into it other than because it fits. Otherwise, we ain't here to talk about ourselves in those ways. That ain't really the best manners. But I only bring it up because when my foundation decided to subsidize some of these gyms, more to get kids off the street, to give them an alternative to violence, but to find themselves. And somebody had asked me after we ran the gyms for about 10 years, what came out of it? What would you say? You got some kids that got back to school, that they got on the right path of life. Obviously, someone on to become fighters, but to me, those weren't the big successes. It was the other ones. And when they asked me the same question, I said, "What does boxing do? What is the one thing you say it does to really save somebody or improve somebody?" The one thing that I would say that it did, people are gonna laugh when I say this, that it did, in my experience of running these programs, was it allowed some of these kids who had already been beaten up by life, beaten up, oh my God, they've been abused, it allowed them to like themselves. I'll say it again. It allowed them to like themselves.
It's a respect thing, right? It's not necessarily respect for yourself.
But just they didn't like themselves because they were taught not to like themselves by abusive parents, people that shouldn't have been parents. I'm sorry. Some people shouldn't be. I'm sorry. It's just the way life is. But whether people want to hear it or not, you might not have been out there enough to see some of the relics that used to be children, and they're not children anymore because they were abused, because they were not brought up by the right person, unfortunately. And meanwhile, there was something beautiful in them that never got a chance to come out, and it was destroyed. And again, the sport, I saw evidence of it impacting kids in a way where if it did one big thing for them, it would start with allowing them to have permission to like themselves, to have a reason to just feel the way we all want to feel, good about yourself, which these kids never had a chance.
Everything comes from within, right? Behavior, if you don't have any respect for yourself, you're not going to have any respect for others. And that's one of the big things I find. I teach kids in schools, I teach kids in the gyms. It's just get involved, get started. Once you put yourself in that vulnerable position, because I think it's that lack of respect for yourself, not necessarily respect, but that fear that stops people from actually putting themselves in that.
And I'll tell you one other thing, since you brought it up, here's another one for you. Okay, I'm gonna piggyback off this smart man. I am. The most important lesson, if we're here to give lessons, and hopefully learn a little something about this stuff from, again, a guy that didn't finish high school. I don't know, you can learn from me, but maybe about what I learned from boxing and life in the way that I've lived it, is that the most important thing to understand about fear, when you have it, first of all, you'd be dead if you didn't have it. God put it there, nature put it there for a reason. The only reason why you get through a day is because when you cross that street, which you did at some point during your day, unless you're a hermit in a cave somewhere. But otherwise, you went across the street at some point. You looked both ways. Why? Because you were afraid of getting killed. Yeah, you don't think of it that way. I get it. You don't think of it that way. But no, it was fear that kept you alive. And so the most important thing about what he just touched on in the right way is that when people feel fear, they feel they're inhibited. They feel they're less. They feel they're yellow. They feel they're a coward. They feel like, oh, I'm not tough enough. And they keep it quiet. They don't talk about it. They because it's a taboo word in our society. We've been taught, oh no, don't talk about that. Of course you're not afraid. Of course, no, you better be afraid. You better be afraid because God put it there. Nature put it, whatever you believe in, put it there for a reason. What you have to learn is that it's not your enemy. It's your friend. Yeah, it's your friend. That it's there for a reason. It's up to you to learn to control it, to use it, to understand it. Yeah, to shake hands with it, so to speak. But it's up to you. But it's there for a reason. And I'll finish with this, to what he said in a brilliant way, that a lot of kids, they feel afraid, so they don't try some, or they run away from something, or they go in their room and they suffer quietly because they are afraid and they don't want nobody to know. Never, ever forget the other person that you think is so confident is afraid too. Even in a fight, when you're sitting in the locker room and you look across and you're looking at that guy and you say, oh my God, I gotta fight that guy? Look at him. He's not afraid. No. He feels the same way as you feel. He's doing what you're doing. You don't even know you're doing it. He ain't showing it. The only way someone knows you're afraid is if you show it. If you allow it to get to that point where you actually show it. But otherwise, no, you're putting up a facade too. For the same thing as him, because you're not showing it. But just remind yourself, oh no, he's afraid too. He's doing what I gotta do. He's dealing with it. But yeah, everyone feels it. Everybody's afraid. You're no different.
No,
Welcome to the club.
I could vouch for that. I felt like running out of the locker rooms before, but once you learn how to attack that fear, like you attack the punches, that's how you answer it. Attack the fear, with caution. Use the fear. Don't be blasé about it, but attack it with caution. What you've learned and discipline. Listen, Teddy, I finished
with one more thing.
Go on.
I wrote a story.
Yeah.
It's in a book called. The name of the book is called, I think it's the KGB, because back in the day there was a bar, KGB communist bar in New York City, and then when it went away, writers kept the name, and they used to go there and drink, talk literary stuff, and I think it's called the KGB Table Reader. Anyway, what it is it's a collection by Jack Newfield, who was a great journalist. He put together a collection of short stories by great writers. There's one story that got published in there that's not by a great writer. Guess who it's by?
The man himself.
Not a great writer, but I wrote it. It's called Shadows of a Room. And it talks about a fighter. What he just touched on. That's the reason why I grabbed it. Because of what he just said. When he was in life, he was honest enough to say, I thought about running out. Actually, fighters do think about it. You'd have no idea, you'd be shocked. I wrote a story called Shadows of a Room that explores that. That actually it's a fighter for his first fight, an amateur fighter, sitting in the locker room and what's going through his mind. And I'll just leave you with one thing he was hoping that a fire would break out. He made a deal. He said, I don't want no one to get hurt. I don't want no one to get hurt in a fire. I just want a fire to break out so the alarms go on and the sprinkler systems go on so the fight gets canceled. Shadows of a Room, talking about exactly what this man just talked about. I'm sorry I took up all your time.
No. And because I was going to finish it and then you've got me going now. But I think when people think about that analogy of fear, the one person they think about, on the most part, is Mike Tyson, the baddest man on the planet. And I think one of the most powerful videos that I've seen and that most people will reference is Mike as a kid crying, and then you go out and comfort him. Yeah, you know, people don't, because, and then I think he went out and knocked him out in 15 seconds.
Yeah.
But that fear, and I think that is the most striking, because he's such an icon and because of his image as the baddest man on the planet. I think when people actually see him crying before the fight and see you go and comfort him, it's it's one of the more impactful viewings where you think, wow, if Mike Tyson's frightened, then everyone's frightened.
Because it gives you an example. It puts, it puts actual, proof to what we're just talking about.
Yeah.
But then you see it, and you see, like you say, you see it with a guy who became an iconic fighter.
You put these people on a pedestal, but they're just people at the end of the day, and same as you.
All human.
Yeah.
All human, and with that humanness comes flaws.
Yeah.
But sometimes those flaws can make us great.
Exactly.
Because we can learn from them.
Teddy, you're the man. Thank you so much for everything you do for boxing, all the help, all the old fighters you help talk about, and I'll try and continue that legacy.
You are doing it, and I thank you. That's why I sat down with you. You're doing something important, not just for the sport, and not just for the fans, and it is, but just in general, to allow people to have access to these stories and what they can learn from it. Each one of you will learn whatever it is that you're prone to learning. However you take it, you'll take something different than someone else will take from Henry Armstrong or Gene Tunney or from Archie Moore, any of them. But you'll take something, and there's not enough of it out there. And the only way you can take it if it gets out there. He's getting it out there, and again, I applaud him for that. I thank him for that. I appreciate you for that.
Thank you. I appreciate you. Top man. Thank you very much.